MegaHerzzz. You're listening to MegaHerzzz on 4ZZZ.
You are listening to MegaHerzzz on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM or digital radio. We are 4ZZZ's feminist and social justice show covering local issues and events and showcasing women and femme-led music. My name is August. My pronouns are they, them.
My name is Charlotte. My pronouns are she, they.
And just before we get into it, MegaHerzzz and 4ZZZ would like to acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people as the sovereign owners of the unceded land on which we live and broadcast. We pay our respect to elders past, present and future and the Yagara, Turrbal, Yagarapul and Quandamooka nations, and we stand in solidarity with all First Nations people in their fight for justice.
All right, today we have an interview with Regan Mitchell, the Director of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Strategy at Our Watch. We will be discussing Our Watch's 16 Days of Activism campaign and digital violence. Before we get into our interview, I just want to acknowledge the awful events that happened at Bondi yesterday. We know that at this point in time, 16 people have been killed and 40 injured at a Jewish community event. I want to extend my deepest condolences to the victims' families and friends and to the entire Jewish community. Everyone deserves the freedom to live, celebrate and worship without fear. I'm sure we have some other 4ZZZ shows who may have some more comprehensive coverage. Otherwise, our team will report back with more information as it comes out over the following weeks. Everyone, please make sure you take care of yourselves. All right, you're listening to MegaHerzzz, and we're about to jump into an interview with Regan Mitchell. So Regan Mitchell is the Director of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Strategy at Our Watch. We will be discussing Our Watch's 16 Days of Activism campaign and digital violence. Okay, Regan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hello. Hi Regan. How are you?
Well, thank you. Hi, Charlotte and August. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I'll jump into some questions, Regan. Can you explain Our Watch's role in the violence prevention sector?
Yes, so Our Watch is a national organisation that focuses on stopping men's violence against women and their children before it starts. If we want to prevent anything from happening again in any context, we have to know what the root causes are of the problem to be able to address the problem properly. Our Watch has a strong evidence base which tells us when there's environments where women are not equal to men, when there's disrespect and misogyny, and when there's racism and discrimination, we can expect to see more women suffering from violence at the hands of men. Our Watch mostly don't work with victim survivors or men who choose to use violence, but we work to change the environments and the systems and the structures that these problematic and harmful attitudes and behaviours live and thrive in, and also to raise awareness to the direct link of these types of environments and to women being unsafe. We know prevention can't stop violence against women on its own, and either can respond, but we can't just keep responding to violence and what it feels like putting fires out, and it keeps happening again and again for the same reasons. For any real long-term change as a society, we need to also understand and treat the underlying root causes.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that distinction between prevention and response is something that's not super understood by a lot of people. So thank you for laying that out for us a little bit. So we were going to talk about 16 Days of Activism a little bit this week because it ended on the 10th of December. So what does 16 Days of Activism mean to you?
The 16 Days of Activism is always something I look forward to because it's such a meaningful time of the year, and it forces the much-needed light on a dark issue that a lot of people still don't want to talk about and still see violence against women, particularly within intimate partner relationships, as not their business. This initiative increases that awareness and attention, and I think it ramps up our demand for action to end violence against women and children. But it's also important we just can't be doing this on 16 days of the year and forget about it until next year. This serious issue is a preventable issue. It's not going away on its own, and it must be a priority for all of us all year round. We are seeing more and more boys and men getting involved and standing up, which is fantastic. But for the severity of this issue, it means it's going to take more people to educate themselves on the why this is happening in the first place, and then to step into being part of the solution. As I said, not just in the 16 days. Ending violence against all women will benefit everyone, and it's way past time the issue needs to come out of the darkness and make it your business.
100%. I'd also love to hear what the Our Watch 16 Days campaign is focused on this year.
Yeah, we know that young people are constantly exposed to and engaging with online content about sex, about pornography, dating, relationships, gender stereotypes and masculinity. So this 16 days, Our Watch focused on ways to better equip parents and carers to have these types of conversations with the young people in their lives, which can be awkward conversations to have. So Our Watch developed a campaign called Chats That Matter, which has practical tips on how parents and carers could be having these important conversations with young people. It's so normal and healthy for young people to be curious about sex, dating and relationships. So it's important we can find ways to have these conversations and to ensure that parents and carers have the opportunity to give the right advice and provide the right support to empower young people and to help them have safer experiences online. You know, some of these tips include things like creating a private, no-pressure place to talk, remembering that listening is just as important as talking, keeping lines of communication open afterwards. And the more we find ways to talk about it, the easier it gets and the more normal these conversations become.
Absolutely. So obviously the theme for 16 Days of Activism this year is looking specifically at digital abuse. So why do you think it's important to target these conversations specifically at parents, carers and young people in this context?
Yeah, Our Watch research shows over half of young men look to their parents as key sources for information about dealing with emotions, dating and relationships. And this year, very recently, the Adolescent Man Box survey by the Jesuit Social Services told us that despite the growing influence of online spaces, boys continue to rely on real-life relationships, especially parents, for guidance on personal issues and their understanding of masculinity. 59% of boys said their dad or male parental figure had a big impact in shaping their ideas about masculinity, and 48% said the same for their mum or a female parental figure. This is good news. It means we as parents and carers have an incredibly important opportunity and responsibility to be creating the right type of spaces and initiating ways to be talking about our kids and young people in our lives about these topics as honest and openly as possible.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people maybe just me, but I feel like we kind of underestimate the ways that young people do look up to their parents. I think when they're teenagers, you kind of think that it's all kind of influenced from their friends and stuff. But I think that's so important to acknowledge that, yeah, parents have such an influence in these attitudes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, would you be able to explain to us and the listeners at home how tech abuse is driven by the same gender inequalities as physical violence?
Yeah, tech abuse is underpinned by the same drivers as the other forms of abuse, things like misogyny, power and control and disrespect to women. We know young people are entering the online world very young and are bombarded from the time they open their eyes up and pick their phones up with these harmful attitudes and content that includes young men being told by super admired influencers that they should control and abuse women. We see these belief systems and behaviours being glorified online. We have to make sure that young people first can be able to identify these harmful behaviours, then have the tools to reject them and the confidence to call it out. Instead of leaving it to online influencers and having no control of what our kids are exposed to, we want to make sure that our young people and our children can learn what respectful and healthy relationships look like and what they feel like to be in and around at our homes, at schools and online. Respectful relationships education is one of the most important levers also to prevent this abuse with age-appropriate content starting from primary school and sometimes younger and continuing throughout their schooling.
Absolutely, yeah. I know there's a lot of other campaigns at the moment kind of targeted around those algorithmic, kind of misogyny that we're seeing. It's really important that campaign is targeting this kind of area. For, in the spirit of 16 Days of Activism, what do you think is the most important single action a listener can commit to doing during or outside of these 16 Days of Activism?
It's a really important question. We need more men to be talking about this to other men and to care about it. That's the bare minimum we need. If you're a man and your family, your mates and your work colleagues know what footy team you follow, that's great. But do they know your views and your position on men's violence against women, or even if you have a position at all? Learning about the root causes, the why of violence against women, which is an issue that's plaguing our country and yet is entirely preventable is such an important first step or an action that, will give you the confidence to start speaking to people about it. Having conversations and keep having them. Seek out opportunities to talk about it, especially men with other men. We know men hear men differently than women and boys, and normalise this topic in your homes and in sport and in your workplace or wherever you are. Things like women not being equal to men, sexist, disrespectful and misogynistic attitudes and comments, even when it's framed as a joke, that expectation on men and boys to be physically tough and women are expected to be sitting at home knitting, it all needs to stop. There's no room for it anymore, especially when we know it's directly linked to violence against women. And if you're not motivated to stand up for women and children's basic right to respect and safety, make no mistake, men are also being harmed by the patriarchy. It isn't working for them. We tell men to man up. We put this constant pressure on men to prove how tough they are, and we don't allow men to cry or be sad. And when they do, we call them weak. That's from women as well. We're responsible for that as well. But we expect them to suppress their feelings, although we do accept them to be angry. We also expect men to be the primary breadwinner and the protector. All this comes with such enormous pressure that we put on men, and all these types of attitudes are so harmful to men and also contribute to men having poorer mental health, substance abuse, loneliness, and even suicide. So we all need to make the choice, because it is a choice, to care about this issue, invest in this issue, not just in the 16 days, but all year round, if we're serious about change that we know will benefit everybody.
Absolutely. And where can people go right now to find Our Watch's resources and info?
I encourage people just to jump on our website and social media channels for a lot more resources and information about, all the strong and really clear evidence on what is driving violence against women to happen in the first place. There's also lots of tips and guidance on your role and responsibility, how you can get involved and contribute to changing it.
Definitely.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Regan. I also just wanted to ask, given your role as specifically Director of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Strategy, I'd also love to hear about whether there are any specific resources or information you would like to share for our First Nations listeners.
Yeah, for sure. Changing the Picture is an Our Watch national resource. I'm really proud of it. And it talks about the additional and specific drivers of violence against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women. It really takes you into a deep dive through those drivers and what they can look like for us as Black women and for non-Indigenous people today. And it sets out a clear guide on ways to address the violence against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women specifically. I strongly encourage people to take the time and jump on and have a look at Change the Picture.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Regan. Yeah, that's all been such important information. I've definitely learned a lot.
100%. Thank you so much for chatting to us. I'm sure the listeners at home really found something really rewarding in that. I'm sure we definitely did as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for prioritising and taking the time on this important issue.
Oh,
That's
of course.
Thank you so
We try
much.
our best. We try our best.
Thank you so much to Regan again for their time today.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, on that same topic, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Teach Us Consent campaign that's happening, which is, related to digital abuse and online violence. So Teach Us Consent are I believe, a New South Wales-based consent organisation it was started by a young woman called Sherele Contos, who, she's just an amazing advocate. But they currently have an open letter to the Prime Minister discussing basically, the online manosphere and all the algorithmic kind of, contributions to misogyny and the increase in misogynistic attitudes for young men and boys. So their current campaign is basically urging the government to require social media platforms to offer an opt-in to algorithms, giving us more autonomy to turn our algorithms on and off. There's a lot of data that they've gathered that's basically kind of looking at how young men and boys are directly distributed a lot of misogynistic content and content that kind of takes them down that manosphere rabbit hole, and such an important thing to be intervening in that quite early, as Regan talked about, that prevention kind of side of things of addressing gender equality as a solution to violence is really important. So you can find more information about the the Teachers Consent campaign at the moment called Fix Our Feeds. So important. Have a look at the open letter, add your name, and just look at all the evidence that they've gathered alongside, all Our Watch's really big wealth of evidence base. It's all so important and, really good to educate yourselves and that kind of thing.
Yeah, incredibly informative and very important to do. If you are a regular listener of MegaHerzzz, you would know that we have made it our duty to report on femicides and the deaths of women and people in Australia. As many of you would have seen before, earlier, the attacks in Bondi happened, and we don't really know much information about a lot of the victims, though presumably there would have been some women who would have fallen victim to this horrific event. We plan to have more information on that next week, and to say their names and really do them justice. We don't luckily we don't have a femicide outside of that to report this week, but it is worth mentioning that a woman is currently in critical condition after a man deliberately hit her with his car on the Sunshine Coast earlier this week. She's currently fighting for her life in hospital, and a man has been charged with attempted murder after he drove his vehicle into them after having an argument. We send love and well wishes to her and hope for her speedy recovery. And like I said, we will be back to talk about further femicides when we get information on them next week. If you or someone you know is in a situation where they are in a domestic violence situation and you need help, you can call 1-800-RESPECT or 1-800-737-732.
Make sure you're taking care of yourselves.
Yes,
that is a counselling line, and you can talk about all things. Yeah,
and if you need to text them, it says 0458 737 732. So, yes, very important to do. But is this the last you'll be hearing from us?
You'll probably be the last we'll be hearing from us. So, thank you so much for listening. This is MegaHerzzz on 4ZZZ.
Bye.
Isn't that what feminism is about?